The medieval world holds dark yet fascinating stories. Tonight we'll wander into the kitchens and fields of the Middle Ages, exploring the foods that kept peasants alive and the quiet rituals of eating that shaped their days. Before you settle in, take a moment to make yourself comfortable. And if you enjoy these late-night history wanderings, consider subscribing. And if you'd like, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. It's always fascinating to see who's tuning in from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe put on a small fan just for that steady hum in the background. Now let's begin. What if I told you that a simple bowl of pottage or a coarse loaf of bread could carry the weight of survival? For medieval peasants, food wasn't just nourishment, it was a daily struggle, a comfort, and sometimes a quiet act of endurance. You wake to the faint smell of smoke. The hearth has cooled, but embers still glow beneath the ash. You stir, pulling the rough wool blanket tighter around your shoulders. The morning light pushes through cracks in the shutters, pale and grey, more shadow than warmth. Your first thought isn't the weather, or the work waiting in the fields. It's bread. On the wooden shelf near the hearth lies a round loaf, hard as stone, dark against the pale grain of the shelf. You baked it 2 days ago, mixing barley with rye, the coarse flour ground at the village mill. The crust is thick, cracked in places, with a faint dusting of bran still clinging. It doesn't look inviting, not the way soft white bread might at the Lord's table, but to you it is the center of the day. You take your knife, its edge worn thin from years of sharpening, and press it into the loaf. It resists at first, the crust crunching under the blade. You lean your weight, slicing through. The inside is dense, heavy, flecked with bits of husk. You break off a piece and chew slowly. The taste is earthy, a little sour, not unpleasant, though your teeth find grit where the millstone shed fragments into the flour. This is breakfast. Not butter, not honey, not jam, just bread. In the Middle Ages, bread was more than food. It was survival. It sat at the heart of every meal, no matter how humble or grand. For peasants like you, it was the first thing you reached for in the morning and the last thing you ate at night. Some years, it made up more than half of what you consumed in a day. The kind of bread you eat marks your place in the world. Wheat bread, fine and white, belongs to nobility, to lords and ladies who sit at high tables. For them, bakers sift out the bran, grind the flour smooth, bake loaves that are light and soft. You've seen them once when you helped carry grain to the manor. Loaves so pale they looked almost golden in the candlelight. That isn't your bread. Yours is darker. Barley and rye, sometimes oats if the harvest was kind. It fills the belly, but it never rises tall, never softens the way wheat does. It is peasant bread, honest and stubborn, shaped into rounds or flat discs, baked in an oven that serves the whole village. You and your neighbors take turns, the smell of baking rising into the air like a signal of survival. On feast days, you've eaten trenchers, thick slabs of stale bread used as plates. The Lord's meat and sauces soak into them, and when the meal is finished, the trenchers are given away. Sometimes to the poor, sometimes to dogs. You remember the taste, the richness of grease and spice soaked into bread that would otherwise be dry. A gift in its way. But today is no feast day. Today is work. You pull on your shoes, rough leather stiff from the damp. Outside, the village stirs. Smoke rising from chimneys, the sound of animals shifting in pens. You carry a small sack of yesterday's bread, wrapped in cloth, to take into the fields. It will be your meal at midday, perhaps softened in the pottage if you're lucky. Bread is never wasted, even stale, even hard as wood. It finds a place at the table. You've seen loaves dunked in broth until they crumble, fried in dripping if such luxuries are at hand, or ground again into crumbs for thickening stews. Waste is a sin, and hunger too near a memory to forget. The harvest last year was decent. You remember the miller's stone grinding through sacks of grain, his hands white with dust. He takes his toll, of course. A portion of every sack belongs to him, another portion to the Lord. What remains is yours. Enough for bread through the winter, if you're careful. You pass by the mill now, its great wheel turning slowly with the stream. The air smells of damp wood and flour. You think of the hands that carried grain here, the backs bent underweight. Every loaf of bread carries that labor. Weeks in the fields, days of threshing, the journey to the mill, the hours of kneading and baking. It is more than food, it is work, transformed. By midday, you sit at the edge of the field, the sky low and heavy with clouds. Your hands ache from the spade, your back stiff. You take out the piece of bread wrapped in cloth. It is harder now, the crust like stone. You break it against your knee, dip it into a bit of broth from the pottage someone brought. The bread soaks it up, softening just enough to chew. It tastes of cabbage, onions, salt, flavors clinging to each bite. Others around you eat the same. Bread in every hand, some with a sliver of cheese, a rare treat. A boy gnaws at a crust, his teeth working furiously. An older man sprinkles crumbs into his soup, stirring with a wooden spoon. There is silence as you eat, the steady rhythm of chewing, the sound of wind over the stubbled field. In times of plenty, bread can feel ordinary. In times of want, it becomes sacred. You remember a year not long ago when the rains ruined the harvest. Loaves were stretched with peas, beans, even ground-up acorns. The taste was bitter, the bread heavy, but it kept you alive. People whispered about famine bread, about bark ground into flour, about loaves so dark they looked like lumps of earth. Hunger makes bread strange. Tonight, back in your cottage, you bake again. Flour, water, a pinch of salt if you can spare it. The dough is rough under your hands, sticking to your fingers as you knead. You shape it into a round and slide it into the oven, the heat from the fire searing your cheeks. You wait, the smell rising slowly. Warm, nutty, filling the air with promise. When the loaf is ready, you tap the crust. Hollow, hard. You set it aside to cool, though your belly grumbles. Bread must rest. If you cut it too soon, it clings and crumbles. Patience is part of eating. Later, by the glow of the hearth, you break the loaf with your family. Everyone takes a piece, no more, no less. There is comfort in the ritual, in the sound of crust breaking, in the act of sharing. The bread fills you, simple and steady. As the fire dies down, you think of how bread shapes the rhythm of life. Harvest to mill, mill to oven, oven to table, day after day, year after year. It is not luxury, not spectacle. It is survival, plain and steady. Tomorrow you will wake again to the thought of bread. And in the Middle Ages that thought is never far. The fire never fully goes out. Even in the deepest part of the night, a few embers glow beneath the grey ash, waiting to be stirred back to life. When morning comes, you crouch beside the hearth, blowing gently until the orange deepens, feeding the fire with kindling until flames lick up again. The warmth spreads through the cottage, driving away the chill of dawn. And above it, hanging from a blackened hook, is the pot. It is old, dented and blackened with soot, but it holds the promise of the day's meal. It never truly empties, never fully cleansed. Yesterday's broth clings to the sides, flavoring today's stew, carrying memory from one day into the next. You take a ladle of water from the bucket and pour it in, the hiss of steam rising as the iron heats. Then you begin to gather what you have. Pottage is never quite the same, never fixed. It is built from what can be spared, what lingers in the storehouse, what the season allows. Today you drop in barley, rough grains that swell and thicken as they boil, a few onions shriveled from storage, still sharp in smell but softened once they cook. If you're lucky, there are leeks pulled from the garden, their white stalks sliced thin, mingling with herbs. Parsley, thyme, whatever the hedge provides. The pot begins to murmur as the ingredients tumble in, water clouding with starch, scent rising, filling the room. There is no rush. The stew will simmer all day, a slow, gentle companion to your labor. You stir with a wooden spoon, watching the swirl of vegetables and grain, the bubbles breaking at the surface. The smell is earthy, honest, comforting. Pottage is the peasant's dish, the heartbeat of medieval life. Where bread sustains, pottage nourishes. It stretches what little you have, turning scraps into a meal. The pot waits while you work, ready when hunger returns. It holds no ceremony, no display, just warmth, just sustenance. You break off a piece of yesterday's bread, hard as a board, and drop it into the steaming broth. The crust softens, soaks, becomes part of the stew itself. You taste a spoonful, the heat filling your mouth, flavors simple but satisfying. Grain and onion softened by hours over fire, with a hint of herbs carried in the steam. Outside, the village stirs. Children chase chickens from the path, women draw water from the well, men carry tools to the fields. But each home, each hearth, carries its own pot, its own stew, simmering in quiet rhythm. No two are alike, though all are built from the same idea. Take what you have, let it cook, make it last. Sometimes, if fortune smiles, you have more to add. A strip of bacon, a bone with scraps of meat still clinging, perhaps a rabbit caught in a snare. These transform the pottage, sending rich aromas into the room, thickening the broth into something rare. Meat is not common on your table, but when it appears, it changes everything. You remember a feast day when neighbors gathered, and the pot boiled with mutton, carrots, and spices brought from distant lands. The smell alone felt like wealth, heavy and rich, coating the air. That was not everyday food, but even now the memory lingers. A reminder of what stew can become when bounty allows. But today's pot is humbler. As you stir, you think of how stew ties the household together. Everyone eats from the same pot, shares the same flavors. Children dip their crusts, elders take small ladles, and all are equal before it. Hunger is softened, bellies are warmed, and life continues. By midday the stew is thicker. The grains have swelled, the broth has turned creamy. The smell greets you as you return from the fields, aching and cold. You sit close to the hearth, letting the steam rise into your face, hands cupped around the wooden bowl. You sip slowly, each mouthful easing the tightness in your body. The pot does not empty in one sitting. It carries on into the evening, reheated, thickened further. The flavors deepen as they blend, onion and leek melding with the sweetness of carrot, the saltiness of bacon if such luck holds. What began as thin broth becomes hearty, a meal that lingers, and if a guest arrives, you do not worry. The stew stretches. A little more water, another crust of bread, and there is enough. Hospitality lies in that pot, not in silver plates or fine wine, but in the simple act of sharing what simmers on your fire. You think of winters past, when snow pressed against the cottage walls and the days were short. The pot was your comfort then, the steady sound of bubbling carrying through the dim light, the steam rising like a promise. Even when the ingredients were meager, a handful of beans, a shred of turnip, the stew held warmth, reminding you that life could endure the cold. Stew is not glamorous, not celebrated in song or story, but it is faithful. It waits, it feeds, it carries flavor from yesterday into tomorrow. It ties generations together, for your parents made stew the same way, and their parents before them. The pot you stir today could well outlast you, passed down, blackened further, heavy with the memory of countless meals. Tonight you stir again before bed, ladling out the last portions. The fire glows low, casting flickers of light on the walls. You taste once more, the broth rich and thick now, almost more solid than liquid. It fills you, not just in body but in spirit, a reminder of home, of family, of the rhythm of survival. As you settle into sleep, the pot still hangs above the hearth, empty now, but ready for tomorrow. For tomorrow, once more, you will gather what you have, let it simmer, and let it feed you. And so it continues, and not just for you, but for every peasant who has ever stood by a hearth, who has ever stirred a pot and waited for the steam to rise. The pot is constant, the stew is endless. It is the taste of the Middle Ages, simple and eternal. The morning air is cool, damp with dew, and your hands are rough with soil before the sun has climbed high. You bend low in the garden, pulling at the stalk of a leek, twisting it free from the earth. The smell rises sharp and green, clinging to your fingertips. These small plots carved out beside the cottage are not grand estates or orchards. They are humble patches, but they keep you alive. You brush the dirt from the leek, place it into the basket, and move along the rows. Cabbages huddle close to the ground, their leaves heavy with moisture. You pull away the outer layers, mottled and tough, and beneath, the tight, pale heart waits. It feels solid, dependable. When boiled, it softens, fills the pot, and stretches a meal further than almost anything else. The garden is a place of quiet rhythm. You stoop, you pull, you gather. Each season offers something different, and each season demands that you take only what it can give. In spring you find peas climbing slender stakes, their pods crisp, bursting with sweetness when you press one open. In summer, beans dangle heavy, their skins mottled, but their insides firm. By autumn, the fields and gardens yield root crops, carrots and parsnips, tugged from the earth with effort, their bodies thick and twisted, stained with mud. Vegetables are not decoration here, not side dishes to gild a table. They are the meal itself, boiled, stewed, mashed, and ladled into bowls. Without them, the pot would be thin, the bread alone too hard, too bare. You take your knife to the onions, their skins papery and flaking, revealing the glossy white beneath. As you slice, tears sting your eyes, but you know the taste they will bring once they melt into stew. Garlic too, when you have it, pressed under the flat of a blade, its pungent bite mellowed by the fire, leaving behind warmth that lingers on the tongue. The scent of boiling cabbage drifts from the hearth later in the day, filling the room with its strong, earthy aroma. It is not delicate, not subtle, but it is filling, and in hunger that is what matters. You tear bread and dip it into the broth, letting it soften, then eat until your belly eases. In the edges of the village wild greens grow, sorrel with its tang, nettles that sting until boiled, wild garlic with white flowers that nod in the breeze. You gather them when the garden yields little, and they too become part of the pot. A handful of nettles can thicken a soup, their sting gone once the heat has touched them. Sorrel adds a sharpness, bright against the heaviness of barley or beans. These are not luxuries, they are necessity, found by eyes that know the land. There are moments, rare and bright, when fruit appears. A crabapple tree at the edge of a field, its small fruits tart and sharp. Good only, when cooked down, perhaps sweetened with honey, if any can be spared. Berries gathered in hedgerows, blackberries, elderberries, sometimes gooseberries from a neighbour's garden, eaten quickly before they spoil, or dried if the weather allows. But these are fleeting. The vegetables remain the true constant. You think of winter when the garden lies bare. Then it is the turn of what has been stored. Cabbages hang in cool sheds, carrots and parsnips buried in earth to keep them from shriveling, onions braided together and hung from beams. The smell of drying herbs lingers. Thyme, sage, dill, tucked away in cloth bundles to flavour the long cold months. It is not abundance, but it is survival. At the table, vegetables are shared without fuss. A large bowl of boiled cabbage, perhaps mashed with beans, is set down, and each person takes what they need. The children wrinkle their noses at the bitterness, but they eat, because there is little else. The elders chew slowly, remembering other years, other harvests, the cycle repeating always. In your hands, a turnip feels heavy, its skin rough, purple, fading to white. You slice it, drop it into the pot, and let the fire do the rest. It becomes soft, almost sweet, blending with the broth, until it is hard to say where one flavor ends and another begins. That is the way of vegetables here. They are not eaten raw, not crisp or bright as in the gardens of nobles. They are transformed by boiling, by long hours of heat, until they are soft, filling, and familiar. The work of growing and gathering is constant. You hoe the rows, pull the weeds, bend until your back aches. Children are sent to chase away birds, to keep watch for rabbits. And still, some crops fail. A storm flattens the beans. A frost takes the cabbages. Too much rain spoils the onions. Those losses are felt not as inconvenience, but as hunger. Every plant matters, every harvest counts. Yet there is comfort too. You walk the rows in late summer, leaves brushing against your legs, the air filled with the hum of insects, the soil warm beneath your feet. You see the weight of peas in their pods, the swell of carrots beneath the ground, the thick heads of cabbage turning toward the sun. It is labor, but it is also promise, the promise of meals to come, of another winter endured. When the vegetables reach the hearth, they become something more than the sum of their parts. They join bread and barley, meat if you are fortunate, fish if the river is kind. But always they form the base, the body of the meal. Without them, the dish would be thin, empty, unsatisfying. With them, it becomes enough. At night, you sit near the fire, bowl in hand, and spoon up the softened vegetables one by one. Carrot sweet and earthy, onion melted into the broth until it clings to the bread, cabbage heavy but filling. Each mouthful carries the taste of soil and season, of the garden and the hands that tended it. The day ends as it began, with vegetables close at hand. Tomorrow you will bend again, gather again, boil again, and so it continues. The cycle of planting and pulling, of cooking and eating. It is not feasting, not indulgence, but it is life, steady and enduring. The garden may be humble, the pot plain, the flavors simple. Yet in these small green leaves, these roots and stalks, lies the endurance of a people who asked little more than to eat, to work, and to last through another year. You lean back, the firelight flickering, the bowl empty now, the taste of leek and cabbage still lingering on your tongue. The garden sleeps outside, but it will wake with the sun, and so will you. And once again, you will pull from the earth what it chooses to give, and make from it the meals that carry you through. The smell comes before the sight. A heavy, rich scent, curling through the cold air, drifting from the neighbor's yard. It's different from the usual stew or cabbage. Deeper, heavier, carrying a promise that makes your stomach ache with longing. Somewhere nearby, a pig has been slaughtered. For peasants, this is no ordinary day. The pig is not just an animal, it is months of fattening, scraps saved, a careful watch against illness or thieves. When the time comes, when the animal is too costly, to keep through winter, the family gathers to do the work. The squeal rings out, sharp, then fades, and soon after, the smell of cooking begins. If you are fortunate, you share in it. Not much, a slice, a rind, perhaps a bit of sausage if the family is generous or if the Lord allows. Even a small piece transforms your meal. You drop it into the pottage and watch the broth change, darkening as fat melts and rises to the surface. The flavor seeps into the barley, into the cabbage, into the bread you dip, to soak it up. One bite and the salt, the richness, the heat, fills your chest like fire. On most days, meat is memory more than reality. You might keep a strip of salted bacon in the house, hung near the beams, precious as treasure. You shave off a corner, a sliver, hardly more than a taste, and let it perfume the stew. The meat itself might not reach your mouth, but the flavor lingers in every spoonful. A rind boiled long enough softens, sending waves of salt and smoke into the broth, tricking your hunger into thinking you've had more than you have. Hunting, in truth, is not for you. The woods belong to the Lord, and the deer, the boar, the hare are his by right. To take one is theft, punishable harshly. Still, some try. A rabbit caught in a snare, a bird brought down with a sling, these find their way into peasant pots when luck and secrecy align. The risk is high, but hunger often whispers louder than fear. More often your meat is humble, chickens kept in the yard, a hen that no longer lays, its tough flesh softened by long boiling. The flavor is faint, the bones brittle, but it is yours. Or a goose at feast time, plucked and roasted, its fat dripping into the fire, turning the cottage smoky and fragrant. These birds, when they come, make days memorable, carried in stories told years after. There are festivals, too, when meat becomes the center of joy. At Christmas, perhaps, or on the feast of a saint, when the village comes together and the Lord allows animals to be shared. A whole pig roasting on a spit, the skin blistering and crisp, the fat dripping into pans below. The sight alone feels unreal, indulgent, almost sinful in its richness. Children crowd close, eyes wide, and the air fills with laughter as much as with scent. For one night, hunger loosens its grip, and you eat until your belly strains. But that is once in a long while. On most days, the meat you taste is small, sometimes invisible. The bones boiled into broth, the last scraps clinging to them sucked clean. Offal too, heart, liver, kidneys, chopped, boiled, or fried with onions when the animal is fresh. These parts are not wasted. They are eaten quickly before they spoil, their flavors strong and strange, but welcome. You think of the times when slaughter fills the whole village. When autumn arrives, pigs are killed before winter, and the work stretches from dawn until dusk. Meat is salted, smoked, dried, nothing wasted. Sausages are made, fat is rendered into lard, skins turned into useful things. The smell of smoke drifts for days, and every household receives a portion. Those are good days, when the larder feels full, when you can look at the hanging strips of pork and know that the winter will not be quite so lean. Still, it is never endless. By spring, the salted cuts are gone, the fat jars scraped clean, the memory of meat lingering longer than its presence. You return then to your bread, your stew of leeks and barley, your cabbages and beans. You remember, though, the richness of that taste, the way even a small bite changed the world for a moment. Tonight the pot hangs over the fire again. Into it you drop a strip of bacon rind, the last in the house. It hisses as it touches the water, the fat releasing slowly, curling upward in thin ribbons. You stir, watching the sheen spread across the broth. Already it smells different, richer, as though the pot has been blessed. When you taste it, the salt stings your tongue, the fat clings to your lips. You chew the softened rind carefully, savoring each bite, because there may not be another for weeks. The children crowd close, eyes fixed on the pot. They know by scent alone that tonight is better than most. Their bowls are filled with barley and leeks, yes, but laced with the ghost of pork. You see them eat faster, smiles breaking out, hunger giving way to delight. It is not abundance, but it feels like it. Later, as the fire burns low, you lean back and remember feasts gone by. The day a deer was brought secretly by a friend, roasted quickly, the meat dark and sweet, the time of a wedding when sheep were slaughtered and the whole village feasted on mutton and ale until dawn. These memories are not just of food, but of joy, of moments when survival gave way to celebration. Meat carries with it more than taste. It carries the feeling of plenty, the rare chance to forget hardship. Tomorrow it will be gone. You will stir the pot again with barley, cabbage, onions, the staples that never fail you. But tonight, with the last of the bacon in your belly, you rest easier. Your body is warm, heavy, satisfied. And so you drift, the fire fading, the cottage quiet, the smell of smoke still clinging to your clothes. Meat may be rare, fleeting as a dream, but its memory lingers, carrying you through leaner days. The river is restless tonight. Its surface ripples under the moonlight, dark and silver, the soft current tugging at the reeds. You stand at the bank, net in hand, the woven cords rough against your palms. Your breath hangs in the cold air, the smell of water and mud clinging to you. You are waiting, hoping, because fish is life when other food runs thin. Your stomach reminds you why you are here. Bread fills, pottage comforts, but fish, when you can catch it, offers something else. A heaviness, a richness that clings to your bones. You crouch, lowering the net into the stream, letting the water pull it open. You wait, patient, your eyes following the ripples. A flash there, beneath the surface, a dart of movement. You tighten your grip and pull, heart quickening. The net rises heavy, dripping, writhing with silver bodies. Tonight is a lucky night. Back in your cottage, you kneel by the fire. The fish lie in a basket beside you, their scales gleaming, eyes glassy and unblinking. You gut them quickly, tossing innards to the chickens, wiping your hands on your tunic. The smell is sharp, clean, cutting through the smoky air. You lay them across a grill of iron, the flames licking their sides. Fat drips into the fire, sizzling, hissing. The sound fills the room. Soon the flesh turns opaque, flaking under your fingers. You break off a piece, blow on it, and taste. Hot, tender, delicate, with a faint sweetness that barley or cabbage could never give. On other nights, less fortunate, you return with an empty net. Then you must rely on what is salted, dried, or traded. Salted herring, stiff and briny, hangs in bundles at the market. The monks eat them, the townsfolk buy them, and sometimes you are lucky enough to have one brought home. It is not soft like fresh fish. Its flesh is leathery, the salt biting your tongue, leaving you thirsty for hours. But it lasts. Days, weeks, months. It can be cut into a stew, pounded with herbs, or simply gnawed as it is. It is survival. The church makes sure fish is never far from your mind. Fasting days are many, too many to count. No meat then, no animal fat, no comfort of pork or mutton. But fish is allowed. On those days when hunger claws at you, a simple trout from the stream or a slice of dried herring feels like a blessing. The priests preach that abstaining cleanses the soul, but you know it also keeps the rivers busy and the fishermen fed. For you, it is less holy discipline than simple necessity. Sometimes you walk beyond the village to where the river widens into ponds and marshes. There you search with others, wading in with bare legs, mud sucking at your ankles. Frogs croak, reeds rustle, and if you are lucky, you bring back eels. long, slick, twisting creatures, difficult to catch, harder to kill, but filling. You roast them whole, their skin blistering, the smell rich and strange. They are not delicate like trout, not sharp like herring, but heavy, oily, enough to keep you warm on winter nights. Fish is not just from rivers. If you are near the coast, the sea brings gifts, cod, herring, mackerel. But even inland, salted and dried fish travel far. Merchants haul them in barrels, the wood crusted white with salt, the smell strong enough to follow them down the road. These are costly, yes, but sometimes the manor distributes them on fasting days, sometimes the abbey gives them as alms. You take what you are given, grateful for the change from turnips and bread. There is a rhythm to it. Nets set in the evening, checked in the morning. Children standing by the banks, their toes in the mud, holding lines with hooks carved from bone. Women gutting and cleaning the catch, spreading small fish to dry in the sun, or smoking them above low fires until the flesh hardens and darkens. Every step smells of smoke, salt, and river water. You remember one Lent when the catch was poor, when the river gave nothing for days. The hunger was sharp, the fast stricter than usual. Then one morning, just as hope was fading, a boy returned with a basket heavy with eels. The whole village gathered, watching the long bodies wriggle. That night, every hearth smoked with the same smell, and the quiet of fasting broke into laughter and chatter. It was not a feast, but it felt like one. The taste of fish lingers differently depending on its kind. Fresh trout, tender and pale, eaten hot from the fire, tastes of the river itself, cool and clean. Herring, salted until it stiffens, carries the ocean with it, even when eaten far from the shore. Pike, long and bony, takes effort to eat, every bite a careful dance with its many sharp bones. Eel, oily and filling, clings to your tongue long after the meal is done. Each is a reminder of place, of season, of luck. Tonight you sit by the hearth, your belly warmed by fresh fish, caught only hours ago. The skin crisps beneath your teeth, the flesh soft, steaming. You tear bread, dipping it into the juices that pool at the bottom of the bowl. The flavor is sharp, rich, alive. Around you the cottage hums with small sounds. The crackle of fire, the shifting of straw, the distant call of an owl. For now, you are content. You know tomorrow may not be the same. The river may turn against you, the net may come up empty. Salted fish will stretch only so far. But for tonight, you feel full, satisfied, and warm. You lie back, the scent of smoke and fish still clinging to your clothes, and let your eyes close. The river will be waiting in the morning. The morning begins with a soft chill, dew glistening on the grass. The sun has not yet climbed above the trees, and the air feels still, waiting. You rise quietly, pulling your cloak around your shoulders, and step into the yard. A low bleat greets you. The goats are awake. They shift in the pen, hooves scuffing against the packed earth. Their breath clouds in the cool air, warm against your fingers as you reach for the nearest one. You settle onto the small stool, the wood smooth under you, worn by countless mornings like this. The goat stands steady, its flank warm against your arm. You reach for the pail, the metal cool, and begin. The rhythm comes quickly. Fingers pull, release, pull, release. The stream of milk splashes against the bottom, steady, soft, almost musical. The smell rises warm, grassy, faintly sweet. You lean close, listening to the gentle hiss of milk filling the pail, the goats breathing steady beside you. This is the first work of the day, and it feels ancient, older than the stones of the village, older than the church bells that will soon ring. The pail grows heavier, the sound changing from hollow to full. You lift it carefully, setting it aside, and move to the next animal. Each one offers something different, more, less, richer, thinner. By the time you are finished, your arms ache faintly, your knees are stiff, but the sight of the full pails makes it worthwhile. White, frothy, alive. Back inside the cottage, you set the pails by the hearth. The fire is still smouldering from the night before. You stir the embers, adding a log, watching sparks rise and vanish. Soon the flames take hold, licking at the wood, sending warmth across the room. You pour some of the milk into a clay pot, setting it near the fire. Slowly it warms, skin forming across the surface. You skim it, setting the cream aside. From that cream, later, you will churn butter. For now, you think of cheese. You stir the milk gently, the spoon heavy in your hand, the surface swirling like a pale whirlpool. A few drops of rennet are added, and you wait. The fire cracks. Outside, birds begin to call. The milk thickens, trembles, and then begins to part. Curds rise, soft lumps forming, while the whey, thin and greenish, slips away. You take a knife and cut the curds, slicing them gently, the pieces drifting apart. With a cloth you scoop them out, the warm, soft mass filling your hands. You tie the bundle and hang it by the hearth, letting it drip slowly into a bowl. Drop by drop the whey falls, leaving behind a firmer cheese. Hours pass, but you are patient. This is food that lasts, food that can be carried, traded, stored. Some of the whey you keep. It can be drunk, thin but nourishing, or used in baking bread, giving it a tang. Nothing is wasted. The curds, meanwhile, you press into a small mold, packing them tight, smoothing the top. Later, it will harden, hold its shape, and when you cut it open, it will taste of grass and smoke and thyme. Butter is another task, one that leaves your arms heavy and sore. You take the cream, thick and yellow, and pour it into a churn. The wooden dasher rises and falls over and over, splashing, sloshing. At first, nothing changes. The cream swirls, foams, resists. But you keep going, steady, rhythmic, patient. Minutes stretch long. Then suddenly the sound shifts. The cream thickens, clumps. You look inside, and there it is, golden butter forming, swimming in buttermilk. You scoop it out, pressing it firm, washing it with cool water until it holds together. Smooth, soft, shining, a small treasure. The butter spreads easily on bread, melting as it touches the warm crust. It gives richness where there was none before, turning a simple meal into something comforting. Even a thin smear on coarse barley bread makes the whole morning brighter. The cheese, once firm, is sliced and eaten with onions, or dropped into pottage for flavor. Fresh, it is soft, almost sweet, but with time it hardens, sharpens, grows stronger. In winter, when food is thin, a small piece feels like wealth. Children nibble at it, women grate it into soups, men carry it into the fields for their midday meal. Milk itself is precious, though it rarely lasts long. Fresh, it is drunk warm, straight from the pail, though some prefer it cooled in the stream, stored in clay jars until the chill of the water keeps it fresh for a short while. Sweet and filling, it soothes hunger, though too much can upset the stomach. For children, it is life. For the old, comfort. For you, it is another piece of the day's rhythm. You think of feast days when richer dishes are made. Custards thickened with eggs and milk, sweetened with honey when it can be spared. Soft, creamy puddings, rare and beloved. On such days, milk feels like more than food. It feels like celebration, but most days are simpler. A jug of buttermilk left on the table, tangy and thin, quenches thirst better than ale. A smear of butter on bread makes the morning bearable. A small piece of cheese in your pouch carries you through the work of the day. These are quiet foods, not feasts, but steady companions. In winter, when snow lies heavy and the goats give little, you learn to stretch what you have. The cheeses made in summer are unwrapped, their rinds hard, their insides sharp and crumbly. Each slice feels like a gift from the warmer months, sunlight preserved in flavor. Even the act of milking is more than labor. It is time spent in silence, in rhythm, in closeness with the animal. The warmth of its body against you, the steady sound of milk in the pail, the soft chewing of hay nearby. These moments anchor you, giving shape to the day. Tonight, as the fire burns low, you cut a small piece of cheese and place it on a crust of bread. The taste is humble, earthy, simple. You chew slowly, letting the flavor linger, filling the silence of the cottage. Outside, the goats settle into stillness, their bodies huddled together against the cold. Inside, you feel the weight of food in your belly, the comfort of knowing that tomorrow you can begin again. You lie back, the smell of smoke and milk still clinging to your hands, your eyes heavy. The churn, the pails, the cloth of dripping curds, all will wait for morning. For now you drift, full and warm, into sleep. The orchard waits heavy with the quiet promise of autumn. You step through the grass, dew soaking your boots, the smell of earth and fallen leaves filling your nostrils. Above you, branches bow under the weight of apples, pears, and the last of summer's plums. Each one is a small sun in your hand, the skin cool, smooth, and slightly dusty with bloom. You reach for an apple, the first you have touched in weeks that is still firm and sweet. There is no thought of washing it, the cold air, the wind, the brushing of leaves, enough to carry away dust in its own way. You bite down. The flesh cracks crisp and watery. Sweetness hits first, tartness after, running juice down your fingers. The taste fills your mouth, and for a moment it feels like more than survival. It is pleasure, simple and rare. Beneath your feet, leaves rustle and fall. The ground is dotted with fruit, too bruised to eat raw, but not too spoiled to preserve. You gather them, stacking in baskets, careful to separate the best from the worst. Some will be eaten immediately, others stored for winter. Apples, pears, quince, they are your insurance, your comfort when frost strips the fields bare and the cold presses into the cottage. Berries are smaller treasures, hidden beneath brambles or hanging in clusters on low bushes. Blueberries, blackberries, and the last raspberries cling to the brambles, tiny jewels. You move slowly, careful not to tear thorns in your hands. Your fingers stain purple and red, sticky and cold. Each handful goes into a woven basket, the smell sweet, tart, and sharp. These berries will be dried on racks above the hearth, their sweetness concentrated, kept safe through snow and ice. You pause to breathe. The orchard is quiet, save for the caw of a distant crow and the rustle of wind through branches. The sun is low, casting long shadows, painting the leaves in gold and russet. Picking fruit is slow work, almost meditative. You notice the curvature of each apple, the mottled skin of a pear, the tiny imperfections that make them yours. They are food, yes, but also rhythm, connection, a way to mark the passing of the seasons. Some fruit is eaten immediately, slicing into apples and pears, tasting the juice as it runs down your chin. Children follow you through the orchard, laughing softly, tearing at soft plums, their hands and lips sticky. You let them. These moments are rare. Sweetness, even in small doses, carries warmth into the cold days ahead. The larger fruits are stored in crates, straw cushioning each piece to prevent bruising. You arrange them carefully in the cool cellar, where darkness preserves them. Here they will wait, slowly losing moisture, softening in texture, but still keeping their flavor. You check each one, turning it gently in your hands, listening for the slight hollow sound that tells you it is spoiled. Nothing is wasted. Even imperfect fruit is simmered into pottages or baked with coarse flour into cakes that taste of sun and sugar. Berries, however, are another story. They must be dried slowly, carefully, to preserve both flavor and color. You spread them across flat boards set near the warm embers of the fire. Hour by hour the heat rises, the berries shriveling, darkening, sweetening. You stir them occasionally, checking that none stick or burn. The scent fills the cottage, tangy, deep, alive. By the end of the day, the boards are full of tiny dried jewels ready to store in clay jars or woven baskets. Fruit is also medicine. You know which berries calm the stomach, which apples soothe a cough, which plums help ease a child's fever. These are lessons passed down through generations, whispered in the quiet moments of care. You remember your mother slicing apples into warm water, letting a child sip slowly, the taste sweet and protective. Food and healing intertwine in ways you cannot separate. Some days you trade fruit. A neighbor has a basket of apples in exchange for a handful of dried beans, or a piece of cheese, or a bit of butter. The exchange is simple, silent. No contracts, no counting coins, just understanding of value, season, and need. Fruit carries weight beyond its flesh. It carries favor, gratitude, survival. You notice the small moments too. A crow perched atop a branch watching you, perhaps waiting for a fallen apple. A squirrel darting through the leaves, stuffing its cheeks. The sun warms your back, the cold breeze brushing your face. These are small comforts, unnoticed in the rush of survival, but present if you pay attention. Even in winter, fruit speaks to you. Jars of preserves, thick with sugar when it can be spared, keep the taste alive. Dried apples, pears, plums, stored in dark, cool spaces, are chewed slowly, each bite a reminder of the warmth of the orchard. Berries in jars, shriveled but sweet, are rationed carefully. Small moments of joy amidst the long months of cold. Tonight, as the fire dies low and the last light of the day fades, you bite into a crisp apple. The juice runs down your chin, sweet and sharp. You chew slowly, letting the flavor spread, filling the quiet cottage with the taste of late autumn. Outside, wind rustles through branches, leaves whispering, the day fading. Inside, the warmth of fire, the sweetness of fruit, the calm of hands sticky with juice grounds you. You feel full, not just of food, but of the season itself, the rhythm of picking, storing, preparing, preserving. You think of the months ahead, long and cold, when the fields are bare and the trees are skeletal. You know these fruits will be your companions, your small pleasures, your sustenance. You smile softly to yourself, brushing sticky hands on your apron, listening to the fire's last crackle. And so, as night presses against the windows, you lean back, full, quiet, and heavy with sleep, the taste of apples and dried berries lingering on your tongue. The garden waits quietly in the morning mist. Dew clings to the leaves of thyme, parsley, and sage, shimmering as the sun begins its climb. You kneel in the soft earth, fingers brushing against the soil, feeling the roughness of tiny roots and stems. The smell is immediate, fresh, sharp, alive, and it fills your senses before you even touch a single sprig. You pull a handful of parsley, its green leaves soft but resilient, twisting them gently between your fingers. The scent rises, faint but distinct, a promise of flavor to come. Next, thyme, brittle yet aromatic, released with each touch. Sage, its grey-green leaves velvety and pungent, brushing your cheek as you gather it. You know which to use fresh, which to dry for the months ahead. Nothing is wasted. Everything has a purpose. Back in the cottage, you crush garlic cloves under the flat of a knife. The pungent smell sharp and immediate. The aroma spreads through the room, mingling with smoke from the hearth. A pinch of mustard seed, ground between stones, releases heat and tang. These are small things, subtle, almost invisible additions to your daily food. but they change everything. The stew thickens, barley pottage brightens, bread feels more alive when herbs and spices touch it. Outside you think of nobles at their tables, grand halls filled with laughter, silverware clinking, pepper, cinnamon, cloves, exotic, costly, carried across seas, treasures in their own right. They use it freely, dusting meat and sauces with boldness you could never afford. Yet you have your own richness here, the garlic, the mustard, the thyme, all gifts of the earth nurtured in your hands, grounded in soil and sweat. They taste of place, of season, of labor, and they are yours. You crush a sprig of rosemary between your palms. The scent rises sharp, piney, and familiar. You add it to the pottage, watching it darken the broth and change its character. Every stir releases more aroma, each swirl carrying the promise of taste. Even the children notice, noses wrinkling in anticipation as you ladle the hot stew into bowls. A little of this, a little of that, enough to make the simple food sing. Herbs are not just flavor, they are medicine. Thyme for coughs, sage for stomachs, garlic for warmth and strength. You remember your grandmother's hands, shaking herbs into pots while whispering remedies. A sprig dropped into hot water, a leaf crushed and rubbed onto the skin, a tiny seed swallowed for its hidden power. Every meal carries subtle care, every bite infused with generations of knowledge. You move slowly through the garden again, gathering rosemary, marjoram, a few sprigs of mint. Each plant is treated with respect. You brush away dirt, trim carefully, and arrange them near the fire to dry. Some will be used immediately, some stored for winter when the garden is dead and grey. Even dried, they carry life, smell, taste, memory. The grinding of mustard seeds between stone and mortar is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Tiny grains crush, releasing heat and pungency. You sprinkle it into a bowl of beans, a bit into a sauce, tasting each step. The effect is subtle but unmistakable. It lifts simple food into something that feels like abundance. You think of how far a pinch will go, how a small jar, kept safely, can flavor meals for weeks. Garlic, too, is treasured. Not just for its taste, but for warmth it brings to the belly. A clove, fried lightly in fat before adding to broth, releases sweetness as well as bite. The children peel it clumsily, smudging their fingers, but the smell is worth it. The cottage fills with smoke, steam, and the sharp scent of crushed garlic, mingling with the soft aroma of barley and cabbage. The garden is alive with colour and scent, even as autumn deepens. Leaves turn golden, branches bend, yet the herbs persist. You notice how thyme clings stubbornly to the soil, sage spreading low, mint pushing up wherever it can. There is quiet wonder here, patterns of growth unnoticed if one does not kneel, does not touch, does not smell. Every leaf is a tool, every stem a gift. The fire crackles, small but steady, as you bring bundles of herbs inside to hang near the hearth. As they dry, the smell intensifies, filling the cottage, mingling with smoke, bread, and the last of the day's stew. By winter, these dried leaves will be your companions, lifting simple food, brightening bland meals, carrying the taste of sun-warmed earth into cold, grey months. You pause, thinking of the long journey spices take to reach the noble tables, ships across oceans, caravans through deserts, treasures measured in weight and coin. And yet here in your hands the simplest herbs carry a quiet magic of their own. No coin, no danger, only labor, patience, and knowledge passed through generations. The difference is subtle but profound. Your food tastes of life itself, not of distant lands. By evening you sit with a small handful of dried leaves, rolling them between fingers, inhaling their scent. The fire is low now, the hearth warm, the room quiet except for the faint hiss of embers. You drop a sprig into a mug of warm water for yourself, watching the aroma curl upward. Tiny pleasures, almost unnoticed, but they linger longer than you realize. The children taste it too, careful sips, surprise on their faces at the depth of flavor. They learn early that food is more than filling. It is memory, comfort, warmth. You teach them by example, crushing, stirring, sprinkling, showing that even the smallest additions change everything. Tomorrow you will return to the garden. More thyme, more parsley, perhaps sage for the winter store. The rhythm of gathering, crushing, drying, stirring will continue. The fire will crackle, the pot will bubble, and every meal will be lifted slightly, quietly, by what grows around you. And tonight, as you finally set the herbs aside, their smell clinging to your hands and clothes, you lean back against the wall, the warmth of the fire on your back. The cottage is silent now, the world outside dark and still. The taste of garlic, mustard, thyme, and sage lingers faintly in the air, the memory of labor and care filling you. You let your eyes close, drifting into sleep, the subtle magic of flavor carrying you through the night. The morning fog drifts low over the village, dampening the thatch and softening the edges of the cobblestones. You pull your cloak tight and step toward the small brewery at the edge of the yard, the scent of malt and warm water reaching your nose before you even arrive. Ale is the backbone of your daily life, quiet and constant, never strong enough to dull thought, but enough to warm the belly and smooth the day. Inside, the brewing is already underway. A pot of water sits over a low flame, bubbles forming slowly, and malted grains stir in gently. Steam curls upward, carrying the earthy sweetness of barley, the faint tang of yeast. You kneel to stir, the spoon scraping lightly against the bottom, releasing aroma into the dim morning light. Each motion is careful, measured, almost hypnotic, as the grains swell and soak, forming the foundation of the drink you will carry through the day. The process is long, and patience is part of its reward. You lift a handful of malt, rub it between your fingers, inhaling the nutty scent, then add it back to the bubbling water. The mixture thickens gradually, the liquid taking on a deep, amber tone. You skim foam from the surface, tasting small dribbles with your finger. Sweet, warm, slightly bitter, alive. This is nourishment as much as pleasure. Small beer is a necessity. Water, often stagnant, carries illness. The weak ale, barely a few degrees of strength, protects the body, carrying calories and liquid alike. Each meal begins with a cup or two, sipped slowly, the warmth spreading from your stomach into your chest. You feel the fire in the hearth, the early sun through the window, and the slow pulse of life settling around you. Even the children have their mugs, tiny clay vessels filled with the thin ale that smells faintly of grains and fermentation. They sip cautiously, giggling when foam touches their lips, learning early the rhythm of the day. Eat, sip, work, sip again. The villagers move in this steady cycle, the weak ale threading through each moment, marking time as much as bread or labor. Brewing is both labor and ritual. You measure grains into the mash, stir gently, timing each step by feel rather than clock. Yeast is added once the liquid has cooled to just the right warmth, a living thing that will transform your careful work into life itself. You cover the vessel, leave it in a corner, checking it at intervals. The smell changes over hours, first sweet and raw, then tangy and yeasty, finally deep, almost nutty, the promise of drinkable ale. By afternoon, some ale is drawn for immediate use. A mug is poured, amber liquid catching light through the small window. You lift it, inhaling deeply, the scent of grains and warmth, and take a small sip. Bitter on the tongue, sweet behind, lingering in the throat. It fills the emptiness in your stomach that bread alone could not soothe. The children watch, imitating carefully, clinking their own mugs against yours. Ritual and nourishment blend seamlessly. The ale accompanies everything. Breakfast of barley bread, perhaps a small bit of cheese, and a cup of thin ale to wash it down. Midday, when labor has drained your body and the sun hangs heavy, a bowl of pottage and another sip of ale. Evening, when the work is done, the children asleep or tending to small chores. The mug with whatever simple supper you have. The drink threads through the day like quiet rhythm, a soft anchor. You notice the small details, how the foam settles in the corners of the mug, the slight haze at the bottom of the clay, the change in color depending on how much malt you used. Each batch carries its own character. Sometimes it is smooth, almost sweet. Other times sharp and biting, a reminder that fermentation is alive, unpredictable. You respect it, never waste it, drink slowly, savoring the subtle differences. Ale is not just food or drink, it is community. Neighbors swap pints, pour each other small tastes, discuss the process quietly while children play outside. The exchange is simple. A handful of barley for a measure of ale, a jar of honey for a small pitcher. You carry the knowledge of brewing, but also the knowledge of sharing, of maintaining bonds in the village through daily sustenance. Even the smell carries meaning. The waft of fermenting grains from the small brewery signals life, warmth, preparation. It drifts through cottages, mingling with smoke, bread, and herbs, a familiar scent that marks time and place. You pause in the doorway to inhale, closing your eyes for a moment, letting the aroma settle in your lungs, a gentle comfort. At night, when the fire has burned low and the children are asleep, you pour yourself a small mug, steam rising in lazy spirals. The taste is familiar, grounding. You take it slowly, letting the warmth spread, feeling the edges of the day soften. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees, carrying distant sounds of other households, other mugs, other hearths. Inside, you sit quietly, the ale a companion, a reminder that even in simple, hard life, there is constancy, ritual, and care. You think of how each season changes the brew. Summer barley yields a slightly sweeter ale. Autumn grains, roasted by sun and wind, carry a deeper flavor. Winter brews are heavier, richer, fortified by careful attention, the warmth lasting longer in the body. You make notes in your mind, small adjustments for the next batch, learning slowly, observing, absorbing. The process is as much meditation as craft. Sometimes, when the ale is ready, you draw from the fermentation vessel a sample, the liquid cloudy, alive with yeast, and taste it. There is a tang, a living sharpness, a reminder that this is not simply food, it is the result of time, warmth, attention, and life itself. You sip, and for a moment the world feels balanced, the labor of the day acknowledged, the body nourished. Children learn to appreciate this slowly, at first curious about the color, the foam, the sweet scent, then understanding that it fills, warms, and sustains. You watch them sip carefully, faces scrunched, lips tasting, learning that even something weak can be precious, even something simple carries weight and meaning. You clean the vessels at the end of the day, washing out residue, scraping the bottoms, letting the foam and small particles soak overnight. The ritual is quiet, domestic, grounding. Ale is life measured in moments, in patience, in care. Without it, the barley bread is less sustaining, the pottage less comforting. With it, the day has rhythm, and each small sip reminds you that even the most humble drink carries nourishment, warmth, and solace. As night deepens, you place the last mug on the table, steam curling in the firelight. Outside, the village sleeps. The wind rattles loose shingles. The trees sway. Inside, the warmth of fire, the lingering scent of malt, the memory of tastes, and the quiet presence of ale fill the space. You lean back, hands sticky with work and residue, eyes heavy, body content in its slow fullness. And so you drift towards sleep, the mug empty but the memory rich, the taste of weak ale lingering on your tongue. Tomorrow the grains will wait, the water will boil, the yeast will rise, and the rhythm will begin again. For now, you let yourself sink, full, warm, and soothed by the gentle pulse of daily life, carried in barley and water, in fire and patience, in the small, sustaining cup that threads through every meal and every quiet moment of the day. The granary is nearly empty. You stand in the dim light, the scent of dust and dried grain heavy in your nose, fingers brushing over the rough sacks, sifting through what remains. There is barely enough wheat to feed one small meal, barley gone long ago, oats stretched thin. Hunger presses, quiet but persistent, tugging at muscles and bones, a slow gnawing that never quite leaves. You know that survival now depends on invention, on stretching every morsel, every crumb, every seed into something that will fill your belly. You kneel beside the sack of flour, sifting carefully. You pull out a handful of dried bean husks, leftover skins from months of stew. They are hard, fibrous, almost bitter, but they are substance. Crushed, ground, they will bulk up bread, make it heavier, fill the stomach for longer. You add them slowly, mixing with the remaining barley flour, feeling the texture change under your fingers. Dust rises in tiny clouds, caught in shafts of morning light, coating your hands and apron. Next, you gather strips of tree bark, thin and dry, flaking easily between your fingers. The children watch with wide eyes, unsure if this is food at all. You reassure them with a nod, showing how it is crushed into tiny pieces, almost powder, then folded into the dough. The bark adds almost nothing in flavor, nothing in sweetness, but in desperate times, every bite counts. You remember your grandmother, her hands lined and scarred, teaching you the old ways of survival, whispering that when bread is scarce, the earth itself can feed you if you know how to use it. The mixture is rough, coarse under your palms. You knead slowly, pressing moisture into it, folding, shaping. The dough is heavy, sticky, uneven, but it will rise, if just a little, in the warmth of the hearth. The smell is strange, earthy, faintly bitter, but the body is hungry enough that it will not notice. Hunger has a way of making even the dullest food taste like life itself. Outside, frost laces the grass and the thatch, the cold pressing against the edges of your cottage. You move slowly to the small oven, already warmed from the morning fire, and set the dough inside. The heat smells faintly of smoke and ash, mingling with the pungent earthiness of bark and beans. You brush your hands on your apron, feeling the ache of labor, the tension in muscles stretched by hunger, and the slow rhythm of hope. Bread will bake, and tomorrow it will sustain. While the dough rises, you think of other substitutions. Ground acorns, dried roots, even leaves of certain herbs once boiled and crushed. Some give bitterness, some hardness, some chalkiness, but all give substance. You have learned to mix carefully to balance survival with digestibility. Too much bark, and the bread is almost inedible. Too many husks, and it grinds the teeth raw. Experience guides your hands more than any measure or recipe. Hunger teaches precision in desperation. The children wander near, restless, curious. You hand them small bits of leftover pottage, watered down, stretched thin. They eat slowly, eyes wary but grateful. You talk quietly, explaining which parts of trees can be ground, which seeds boiled, which grasses can be pressed for small sustenance. It is not a lesson in taste or pleasure, but in endurance, in knowledge that may save their lives in days yet to come. By afternoon, the first loaf is ready. You open the oven carefully, the smell rising, a strange, heavy aroma, faintly sweet from the remaining barley, earthy from the bark. The crust is dark, hard, but inside the dough has risen enough to provide bulk. You cut a piece, and it resists the knife slightly, dense and coarse, the texture uneven, but it will fill a stomach, it will quiet hunger for hours. You chew slowly, tasting a hint of sweetness buried under the earthiness, feeling the heat spread from your mouth into your stomach, the slow comfort of calories. Neighbors pass by the doorway, drawn by the smell, peeking in, curious. Some nod quietly, sharing small smiles of understanding, not asking too many questions. Everyone has known scarcity. Everyone has known the need for substitutes. In famine years, these practices are not shameful, but survival. Whispers of ancient knowledge that keeps bodies alive through cold, hunger, and fear. The day moves slowly. You prepare a second batch, smaller, adding a few more husks, a little more bark, adjusting as you go. The children play quietly nearby, watching, learning, understanding hunger in ways only lived experience can teach. Outside, the wind rattles loose shingles, the sun dipping lower behind grey clouds. Inside, the warmth of the fire, the heavy smell of earth and baking, and the rhythm of hands moving through flour and husks keeps the day grounded, slow, bearable. Evening comes, the hearth glows low, embers simmering, the air filled with the strange, comforting scent of survival bread. You slice a piece for supper, dipping it into thin pottage, chewing carefully, appreciating the small satisfaction of sustenance. The children eat alongside you, cautious bites at first, then slower, more deliberate, until the hunger quiets, replaced with a dull warmth, the ache softened. In these moments, you understand the power of desperation foods. They carry more than calories. They carry patience, skill, history, knowledge passed from hands to hands, from generation to generation. Each loaf is not just survival. It is a testament to ingenuity, endurance, and the quiet resilience of those who walk the edge of hunger without surrender. Outside, night falls fully, stars sharp and cold above. The wind presses against the thatch and shutters, reminding you of the frost, the hunger, the uncertainty that will return tomorrow. Inside, the fire's warmth mingles with the earthy aroma of baked dough, the faint taste of bark, the reminder that life continues even in scarcity. You feel the slow pull of sleep, body full of rough bread and pottage, mind heavy with quiet reflection, the rhythm of survival lulling you toward rest. Before closing your eyes, you run fingers over the last crumbs left on the table, savoring them slowly. Nothing is wasted. Everything counts. You remember the stories of past winters, of neighbors surviving on roots and husks, of the knowledge quietly tucked into memory for use in times like these. You will sleep tonight fortified not only by food, but by skill, by learning, by the quiet rhythm of labor and care. The hearth burns low. The night presses close. Hunger is not gone, but it is softened, momentarily subdued by the coarse bread, by knowledge applied, by survival. You breathe deeply, smelling the faint bitterness of bark, the warmth of baked grain, the lingering sweetness of beans, and feel your body relax, finally, toward sleep. Outside, the wind whistles through bare branches. Inside, the cottage is still, filled with the faint glow of embers and the memory of sustenance. You drift off, the rough bread heavy in your belly, the rhythm of survival coursing quietly through your bones, carrying you toward dreams of morning and the next small, necessary act of endurance. The morning is crisp, air biting at your cheeks, but today, even the cold feels lighter. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys, and a rare sense of anticipation threads through the village. Today is festival day, the harvest finally gathered, the stores replenished just enough, the year's labor acknowledged in the quiet ritual of celebration. You step outside, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth, and breathe in the sharp scent of winter, of straw, and the distant smoke of cooking fires. The cottage is bustling. Children run about, cheeks rosy, voices higher, lighter than usual. You stir a pot of pottage, thicker than normal, adding a few extra herbs, a pinch of salt saved from the last trade. There is barley bread too, baked with a touch more care. A slightly sweeter dough, perhaps a drizzle of honey, if the bees were generous. Even the smell is different today, rising in warm waves, carrying with it something almost electric, an unspoken promise of indulgence. Outside, neighbors are moving toward the village green, carrying baskets, jars, bundles wrapped in cloth. The path is alive, yet calm, with laughter and quiet chatter. The rhythm of the day is measured not by labor, but by expectation, by ceremony, by the knowledge that for a few hours, hunger will retreat and joy will be allowed. Children chase one another, some clutching small sweetmeats or dried fruits pressed into little bundles, their excitement impossible to contain. You set the table carefully, the rough wooden board scrubbed and lined with clean cloths scavenged from old sheets. Bread sits in a basket, thick and fragrant. Pottage bowls are ready, and in one corner a small platter of salted pork, a rare luxury, its fat glistening in the firelight. A small jar of honey rests nearby, waiting to drizzle over bread or porridge. Every addition, every detail is deliberate, chosen to honor the day and the fleeting grace of abundance. Neighbors arrive slowly, quietly, nodding as they pass the threshold. Some carry small gifts, a few chestnuts roasted over coals, a handful of dried berries, a small wheel of cheese from a goat's milk carefully saved. You share quietly, placing the offerings on the table, noting the way each addition colors the scene, the honey gleaming, the chestnuts deep brown against the pale bread, the pottage steaming and thick. Even modest means feel grand on days like this. Children sit first, eyes wide, fingers reaching cautiously, tasting slowly, savoring. The sweetness of honey on barley bread, the warmth of pottage, the occasional morsel of salted meat. These are small luxuries, but they shine brighter because they are rare. You watch them eat, their joy small but radiant, and you feel the same pulse of relief and quiet celebration. For now, hunger is not the master. For now, warmth, food, and company rule the moment. Outside, the village hums with life. People gather by the green, sharing a little ale, a small cake, stories long told and retold. The air smells faintly of smoke, earth, and the crisp tang of winter. Children dart in and out, laughter echoing through alleys and across frozen puddles. You glance out, noting the shimmer of the sun on frost, the slow drift of clouds across pale blue sky. It feels different from the ordinary days, even more vivid, against the backdrop of hunger and labor that fills the rest of the year. The meal itself is slow, deliberate. Each bite is measured, each sip of weak ale savored. The pottage is thick, hearty, rich with herbs gathered in summer and dried for this moment. Bread, slightly sweet, carries the comforting aroma of home and hearth. Salted pork, an indulgence saved for times of celebration, releases its warmth and flavor slowly, coating the tongue and filling the belly. Even small things, the crispness of an onion added to the pottage, the bitterness of leafy greens sautéed in a touch of fat, feel luxurious when eaten in this context. Stories are shared between bites. You listen to neighbors recount the trials of the harvest, the weather that bent the crops to the earth, the small victories of survival, and the quiet tragedies too, Laughter comes, low and steady, punctuated by quiet nods, gestures, the communal understanding that life is often hard but is always shared. You add your own voice, quietly recounting the careful work of storing grains, of tending animals, of coaxing sweetness from bees. Your words mix with the smoke and aroma, subtle but sustaining, like the food itself. Outside, the village church bell tolls a single note, long and low, marking the occasion. It is not a summons to labor, but to recognition, to rhythm, to something larger than day-to-day survival. You pause, tasting the pottage, letting the warmth spread through your chest and arms. The air is cold, the wind presses against the walls, but inside, in this small gathering, there is warmth, continuity, and a rare sense of abundance. Children share small morsels with one another, trading chestnuts, berries, or tiny coins of honey. Adults laugh softly, swapping news, comparing small successes from the year, murmuring about weather, crops, and neighbors. There is a rhythm to the day, a slow cadence of sharing, eating, talking, drinking weak ale. Time itself feels softer, stretched, as if the heaviness of everyday survival has been lifted for just these hours. You notice the smallest details, the glow of sunlight on the edges of bread, the way steam curls from bowls of pottage, the shine of honey in a jar catching the low firelight. Even the rough wooden table feels alive, each scratch and dent carrying memory and history, echoing hands long gone that set their own meals, performed their own rituals. You touch the cloth on the table gently, feeling the threads worn thin from use, a tactile reminder of survival and care woven together. Desserts, if they can be called that, are humble but cherished. Dried fruits, honey-soaked cakes, a handful of roasted nuts, small luxuries pressed into the rhythm of the meal. Children savor slowly, and you let them, watching eyes widen at each bite, fingers sticky with sweetness, the joy of taste magnified by its rarity. Adults too take small pleasures, a sip of ale, a pinch of sweet fruit, a warm bite of bread dipped in honey. Each moment feels more vivid because it is fleeting, because it is earned. The meal continues into late afternoon, the sun dipping lower, casting long shadows across the village. You take small moments to breathe, savor the warmth, watch the children, glance at neighbors. The pottage is gone, bread reduced to crumbs, ale drawn slowly to the last sip. Conversation softens, laughter quiets, the day winding down. You feel a slow satisfaction in the belly, a rare fullness, tempered by knowledge that tomorrow work resumes, hunger may press again, but tonight abundance has been lived. After the meal, some walk toward the church for evening prayers. Others linger, sharing stories and laughter, the faint clink of utensils, the murmur of conversation, the warmth of hearth and companionship. You sit quietly for a moment, hands resting on the table, eyes tracing the rising smoke, smelling the faint sweetness lingering in the air. Even modest celebrations leave traces, subtle yet powerful, threads of memory and comfort stitched into the fabric of life. As twilight deepens, you begin the slow process of cleaning, storing what remains, arranging bowls and mugs to dry, sweeping crumbs into corners. The children have wandered off, sleepy but satisfied, their small hands sticky with honey and flour. Outside, the wind carries the scent of smoke and frost, the quiet hum of the village settling into night. Inside, the cottage is warm, the air scented with herbs, bread, and the faint tang of ale. You pause, letting your hands rest, feeling the rare fullness in your belly, the quiet pulse of joy lingering from the meal. Hunger is not entirely gone, but it is softened, subdued, momentarily conquered by careful planning, community, and the small luxuries of festival food. You breathe deeply, smelling the air, tasting the faint sweetness still on your tongue. letting the slow rhythm of satisfaction sink into your bones. Finally, you lean back, letting the firelight wash over your face, the cottage settling into quiet. Outside, night is deep, stars sharp and cold above, but inside, warmth and memory wrap around you. Tonight, hunger has not ruled. Tonight, there has been celebration. Tonight, the simple abundance of bread, pottage, ale, and small luxuries carries the weight of joy into sleep, weaving comfort into dreams, a lullaby of survival and fleeting delight. The first light of dawn slips slowly through the gaps in your shutters, brushing against straw-strewn floors and the rough wooden beams above. You stir beneath thin blankets, muscles stiff from yesterday's labor, body already aware of the slow, inevitable tug of hunger. The day begins quietly, as it always does, in the stillness before the sun fully rises. Outside, frost clings to the roof, the scent of cold earth sharp, alive, almost crisp enough to bite at your nose. You rise, pulling the cloak around your shoulders, and move toward the hearth. The embers from the night's fire glow faintly, red-orange beneath the ash, and you add a few small sticks to coax warmth back into the stone and iron. The kettle hangs waiting, water clinking softly as it warms. Your hands are slow, methodical. There is no rush. Each movement is measured, deliberate, the rhythm of the morning already guiding you toward the first meal. Bread is first, always first. You break a small piece from the loaf, saved for morning. Dark barley crust rough beneath your fingers, the aroma earthy, faintly sweet. You chew slowly, tasting the weight of the grain, feeling it settle in your stomach. There is a quiet satisfaction in the ritual, a sense of continuity. This is how days begin, how your body is reminded of sustenance, however humble. The children, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, join you with their own scraps, dipping crusts into water, or leftover thin pottage, eager for warmth, for comfort, for the first small act of nourishment. Outside, the village is beginning to stir. The low murmur of voices, the scrape of a cart over frozen dirt, the occasional bark of a dog, these sounds mark the passage of time, each one folded into the rhythm of labor and hunger. You dress carefully, layering clothing against the cold, pulling boots tight, and step into the air that bites at your cheeks and hands. Even the simplest tasks, collecting water, tending the small animals, preparing for the fields, are marked by the daily beat of need. Hunger underlies every action, shaping your day in ways subtle and persistent. Midday comes with the slow climb of the sun, casting weak light across the village. You return to the hearth, the small fire still smouldering, and prepare pottage. It simmers gently, thickened with barley, softened beans, perhaps a few greens from yesterday's gathering. The smell curls into the air, a quiet warmth, a signal that even in the smallest cottage, life continues. You ladle it carefully into bowls, stirring slowly, tasting as you go. Salt is precious, herbs are rarer still. Every ingredient is accounted for, every morsel meaningful. The children gather at your feet, eager for the warmth and the nourishment. They eat in silence, chewing slowly, aware of the smallness of the portions but comforted by the familiarity of the ritual. You watch them, noting the way hunger is tempered by routine, how the body learns to anticipate, to pace itself. You sip thin ale alongside the meal, the warmth spreading slowly from the stomach into chest and limbs, softening the edges of fatigue and cold. The afternoon unfolds in quiet labor. You tend the small garden, check on animals, repair tools, coax life from soil already exhausted by seasons past. Each movement carries the faint weight of hunger, a low, persistent pull beneath the work. Yet the rhythm of the day, anchored by morning bread and midday pottage, guides you. You measure efforts, pause to rest, breathe in the cold air, let muscles stretch, savoring the small satisfaction of each completed task. By evening, the day has accumulated in your body. Aches in the shoulders, stiffness in the back, a low hum of tiredness. You prepare the evening meal, often scraps, remnants from pottage, a thin slice of bread, perhaps a few beans or bits of salted fat, saved from yesterday. The portions are small, but they are enough to stave off emptiness, enough to let the body rest without the sharp pangs of hunger dominating. You eat slowly, consciously, tasting each morsel, the weight of calories and warmth grounding you in the present. The children settle near the fire, sleepy now, soft murmurs and the occasional small giggle. You wash the bowls carefully, scraping each scrap, letting nothing go to waste. The hearth burns low, embers glowing beneath ash, casting flickering light across walls lined with tools, baskets, and bundles of dried herbs. The rhythm of the day, the morning bread, the midday pottage, the evening scraps, anchors your life, a quiet order in the chaos of seasons, weather, and the ever-present pull of hunger. Outside, the village quiets. The low hum of night carries across frozen ground, the occasional bark, the distant scrape of a cart or footstep on hard earth. You pause, leaning against the doorway, watching shadows stretch long and still. The cycle of labor, nourishment, rest is almost musical, a gentle cadence that threads through every household. Hunger is never gone, but it is softened by predictability, by ritual, by the slow, deliberate pacing of survival. Night deepens. You sit near the hearth, hands wrapped around the warmth of a cup, the faint taste of ale or pottage lingering on your tongue. The children sleep, bodies curled, breaths shallow, dreams perhaps of bread and fields, of small luxuries, of rare sweetness. You let yourself lean back, closing eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of day settle into quiet. Hunger has ebbed enough to allow this pause, the rhythm of morning, midday, evening, guiding your mind toward rest. The fire crackles low, the air scented faintly with herbs and smoke, the memory of bread and pottage still warm. You reflect on the rhythm itself, how it shapes thought, labor, movement, even perception of time. Days are not measured by clock or sun alone, but by the consistent markers of food and survival. Morning bread teaches patience, midday, pottage instills endurance. Evening scraps cultivate reflection, gratitude, and a slow acknowledgement of life's continuity. Even the smallest details are part of the rhythm. The sound of water boiling for the morning kettle, the smell of barley roasting for bread, the weight of a spoon stirring thick pottage, the sticky residue of scraps pressed back into bowls for children or neighbors, the faint chill of wind pressed against the cottage walls. Each element carries significance, unnoticed perhaps by outsiders, but integral to the flow of life, marking the passage of day, anchoring body and mind in survival. You notice the passage of time not in hours but in sensations, the first warmth in your stomach, the heat of sun on your hands, the ache of labor pressing against muscles, the slow settling of the belly after evening scraps. The rhythm is internal, lived, habitual. It is quiet, uncelebrated, yet utterly sustaining. Each day repeats, similar but never identical, a meditation on need, endurance, and small, necessary pleasures. The children stir briefly in sleep, murmuring in dreams, reaching for small crumbs left near them. You smile softly, adjusting blankets, brushing stray hair from their faces. The continuity of care, feeding, warmth, and vigilance threads through the day, weaving security and rhythm into lives shaped by scarcity. Hunger persists, but its edges are softened, predictable, manageable. The daily pattern becomes a quiet companion, a structure against chaos, a gentle lull toward sleep. As the fire dies low, you draw a final breath of warm, herb-scented air, letting the memory of the day's meals settle into your body. Tomorrow will bring repetition: morning bread, midday pottage, evening scraps. The cycle is simple, quiet, unremarkable in appearance, yet it carries the weight of survival. The comfort is in its predictability, its continuity, the subtle certainty that even in hardship there is nourishment, ritual, and a slow, unbroken rhythm threading through every day. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth of belly, the ache of limbs, the faint glow of satisfaction, letting it pull you towards sleep. Outside, frost clings to the earth, night presses in, but inside, the rhythm of daily life, lived fully, slowly, quietly, carries you into dreams. The cycle of bread, pottage, scraps continues, a quiet lullaby of survival, a steady pulse of life in the rhythm of the medieval peasant's day. You leave your small village, stepping onto a road hardened by frost and the slow passage of carts and feet over the years. The sun is low, casting pale light over fields already hushed by winter, and the wind carries faint scents of wood smoke and damp earth. Today your path is longer than usual. You will see how life unfolds beyond your familiar cottages, beyond the rhythms you know so well. You are traveling, moving through landscapes and villages, letting the world unfold under your careful, observant eyes. The first stretch of your journey takes you across low, rolling hills. Fields of barley and oats stretch pale under frost, soil compacted and laced with leftover stalks from harvest. You smell the lingering scent of turned earth, faintly sweet with dried grasses, faintly bitter with decay. Villages pass slowly, smoke curling from chimneys, doors open to allow the faintest warmth to escape. Here, grains dominate the table. Bread is coarse but reliable, pottage thick with barley and beans, seasoned with herbs gathered from the hedgerows. Fish is rare, saved for the occasional travelling merchant or the few rivers nearby, and meat is an occasional indulgence, salted and smoked for preservation. The daily rhythm is familiar: morning bread, midday pottage, evening scraps, all flavoured with the particularities of the land. Further along, the land changes. You pass through valleys carved by rivers, water bright and fast under winter sunlight. Here, villages cluster along the banks, and the smell of salt and brine hints at a life closer to the sea. Nets hang to dry along fences, the fish of the coast carefully cleaned and salted, stacked in barrels for winter. You watch a fisherman returning, small herring dangling from his hands, silver glinting in the fading light. The children run to help, laughing, eager for a taste of the rare freshness. In these villages, pottage is often flavoured with small fish, sometimes dried, sometimes fresh, and bread is lighter, less coarse, occasionally mixed with a handful of wheat, if trade has been generous. Ale flows as always, weak but steady, warming bellies and throats alike. You notice the subtle differences as you move inland again. In upland villages, the soil is poor, rocky, and the harvest smaller, harder won. Oats dominate the table here, often boiled into thick porridge for breakfast, sometimes mixed with beans or lentils. Bread is heavy, barley-based, sometimes with ground husks or bark in lean years. Meat is rare, small scraps of salted pork or bacon rendered into pottage for extra warmth. Dairy is crucial: milk, cheese, and butter stretched across weeks, portions measured carefully, used to flavor the otherwise simple food. Each bite, each bowl is carefully considered. The body's needs guide every choice. Hunger and scarcity are constant, but the rhythm of meals remains, a slow and steady pulse beneath the harshness of the land. Coastal villages carry a different cadence. The air smells of salt and seaweed, winds carrying distant gull cries. Fish is central, often dried or smoked, providing both protein and flavor. Bread is lighter, mixed with wheat brought in from trade, sometimes sweetened slightly if honey is available. Ale is brewed in small batches, slightly stronger near the coast, where grain is more abundant, yet still weak by noble standards. Even the rhythms of meals are affected: morning fish or salted herring, midday pottage with small grains, evening scraps of dried fish and coarse bread. You notice the bodies here are lean, muscles shaped by labour, both on land and by sea. The sun's warmth touches their skin differently, their hands skilled in cleaning nets, handling barrels, preparing fish for meals. As you travel farther, the differences grow. In northern villages, winters are long, sun short, snow heavy. The fields are sparse, the soil stubborn. Oats and rye dominate, barley survives in small patches. Bread is thick, heavy, and baked in communal ovens to conserve fuel. Pottage is stretched with whatever is available: dried roots, beans, leeks, sometimes small bits of salted meat or fish. Dairy remains crucial: milk, curds, cheese, butter, all carried through winter with care, measured and rationed. The rhythm is steady, predictable, yet each day carries the constant awareness of scarcity, the fine balance between labour, nourishment, and survival. In southern villages, the sun is warmer, the soil richer, the rivers slower and wider. Wheat grows more abundantly, and bread is lighter, almost fragrant, with a soft crust. Olive oil, when available, replaces fat from animals, and vegetables flourish in small gardens: leeks, onions, cabbages, and beans. You see small orchards, fruits carefully dried for winter. Pottage may be thinner, more fragrant, flavoured with herbs, garlic, and occasionally small fish from nearby rivers. Even ale is weaker here, sometimes replaced with small amounts of wine if the household can afford it. You notice the subtle shift in rhythm: meals lighter, flavours more pronounced, portions smaller but often more frequent. Hunger exists, yes, but it is tempered by the richness of soil and climate. Travelling through mountain passes, you notice another pattern. Villages cling to steep slopes, animals grazing on terraces, fields carved into rock. Grain is scarce, preserved carefully. Bread is dense, often mixed with rye or barley husks. Pottage is thick, sometimes almost pasty, filled with beans, dried roots, and whatever vegetables can be coaxed from stony soil. Meat is scarce, goats provide milk and occasional cheese. Ale is weak, brewed slowly, portions measured. The rhythm of meals is dictated by survival, by the hard logic of land and weather. Yet you also see resilience, clever adaptations, dried herbs, small preserves, ingenuity that transforms scarcity into rhythm. In riverside towns, trade alters the table. Grain may arrive from distant villages, salt from the coast, small luxuries like honey or spices rarely reaching the tables of peasants, but nonetheless appearing in tiny amounts. Pottage may carry subtle flavours: onion, leek, even the faint tang of herbs preserved in jars. Bread is lighter than in the highlands, more forgiving, sometimes shaped in small rounds or flat loaves. Ale flows steadily, weak but comforting. You notice the rhythm is more forgiving here. Hunger still presses, but small luxuries shift the experience, softening the edges of the day. Even within a single region, subtle differences mark households. One family relies on pottage thickened with beans, another stretches barley bread with husks. One cottage brews ale daily, another only twice a week. Herbs, when available, shift the flavour of simple meals. A handful of dried berries, a smear of honey, a pinch of wild garlic. Small details mark individuality within the shared rhythm of peasant life. You observe, tasting, noting, feeling the pulse of these small differences, understanding that survival is universal, but flavour, texture, and ritual vary subtly with geography and fortune. As evening falls, the villages settle into quiet. Fires burn low, smoke rising in thin trails. Children run briefly, then curl into blankets, small morsels of pottage and bread warming bellies. Adults move quietly, preparing scraps for the next meal, stoking embers, tending animals. The rhythms you observed across the regions, morning bread, midday pottage, evening scraps, remain consistent, yet the local adaptations create subtle shifts in taste, texture, and body's response. Hunger persists everywhere, but the methods, flavors, and small luxuries differ according to coast, river, highland, or lowland. You pause on a hill, looking back over the winding road, villages like scattered jewels across the landscape. Each has its own rhythm, its own subtleties, yet all share the same pulse of need and endurance. Hunger, labor, and nourishment thread through life like a quiet river, carving patterns of survival into every home, hearth, and table. You feel it in your body, in the slow burn of muscles, in the memory of flavors, textures, and smells, in the rhythm of a day measured not by hours but by bread, pottage, and scraps. Night deepens. You find a small inn or cottage to rest. Firelight flickers across rough walls, the faint aroma of barley bread and pottage lingering in the air. You eat slowly, tasting the subtle differences of local grain, perhaps a small fish from the coast, perhaps thick oat porridge from the uplands. Each bite reminds you that geography shapes hunger and nourishment, flavor and survival, weaving local character into the rhythm of the day. You close your eyes, letting the warmth of the meal and fire sink into your body. Outside, frost and wind press against walls. Inside, the pulse of hearth and rhythm of meals carries you towards sleep. Tomorrow will bring another stretch of road, another village, another subtle difference in flavor, texture, and abundance. Yet the rhythm, the daily cycle of bread, pottage, scraps, threads consistently, a quiet companion across landscapes and seasons. Tonight you sleep wrapped in memory of taste and labor, of distant rivers and rocky highlands, of salted fish and dense barley loaves, of clever substitutions and rare luxuries. Hunger persists, always, but the steady rhythm of meals and the quiet variation of regions across the land softens its edges, carrying you toward rest, toward another day in the slow, enduring life of the medieval peasant. You sit at the rough wooden table, the morning light spilling through gaps in the thatch, fingers tracing the grain of the coarse boards. The smell of yesterday's pottage still lingers faintly, mixed with smoke and the faint tang of sourdough barley bread. You lift a small piece of bread, crust thick and uneven, chew slowly, and let your mind wander. What would it be like to taste things you've never held in your hands, never baked into pottage or pressed into a loaf? Potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, corn, vanilla, chocolate, coffee. None of these exist here. Your stomach, used to the modest heft of barley and oat, the occasional dried bean or lentil, has never known the fullness these foods could bring. You imagine biting into a potato, warm and soft inside, earthy but comforting, sinking through your teeth into something unfamiliar, yet nourishing. The concept is strange, almost dreamlike, as if imagining a whole world just beyond the horizon. You try to picture a slice of tomato, ripe and red, the juice spilling freely, flavor sharp and sweet in ways your tongue does not yet know. Your breakfast, though familiar and comforting in its simplicity, reminds you of absence. Barley, oats, beans, leeks, cabbage, these are all you know. You stir your small portion of pottage, steam rising, aroma muted but steady, the flavor faintly bitter from the beans, slightly sweet from whatever root vegetables you manage to save. It fills you, yes, but in comparison to the imagined richness of the New World foods, it feels austere, restrained, deliberate. Hunger is rarely sharp now. It is the slow awareness of limitation, a constant reminder that the earth has not yet given you everything it could. You glance around the kitchen at the dried herbs hanging from beams, the small cheese pressed and shaped by your hands, the handful of apples or berries preserved for winter. These are treasures, luxuries in a peasant's life, yet they are bounded, limited, confined to what this land, this year, this hand can offer. No potatoes to mash, no tomatoes to stew. The world beyond these villages is invisible, tantalizing, a quiet echo of what could be. You close your eyes briefly and let yourself imagine what a modern plate might hold. Golden brown potatoes, crisped with fat. A stew rich with tomatoes and beans, bright greens, spices you cannot name. The thought almost makes your stomach ache, a mixture of curiosity and longing. In place of these absent foods, you make do. Barley bread, heavy but sustaining, broken carefully to last through morning. Pottage simmered with beans, occasionally flecked with the rare bit of bacon or salted fish. Leeks and cabbage boiled gently, turning into a thick, humble broth. Fruits, when they exist, are tart apples, tiny wild berries dried carefully for winter. The flavors are subtle, restrained, requiring attention and patience to appreciate fully. You taste them slowly, aware that each chew, each swallow, is nourishment and ritual all at once. Your mind drifts to spices, the few that reach peasants rarely. Mustard seeds, a pinch of garlic, perhaps some wild herbs crushed into pottage to add faint flavor. Pepper is a fantasy for most, a distant, almost mythical element of feasts for nobles. Imagine cinnamon or nutmeg, cloves or ginger, each bite a sharp contrast to the earthy, muted flavors of your daily bread. You wonder what it would feel like to sprinkle such things into your morning pottage, to taste sharp heat or aromatic warmth spreading across your tongue, breaking the quiet monotony of flavor that dominates peasant meals. The missing foods affect more than taste. They shape your life in subtle ways. Potatoes would have made winter easier, starches dense and sustaining. Tomatoes could have added moisture and brightness to pottage, softening the coarse grains and legumes. Corn could have provided porridge that stuck to the ribs in a way barley seldom manages. Their absence forces creativity, careful rationing, a quiet ingenuity. You measure every portion, mix husks or dried pods into bread to stretch it, boil beans until they yield the faintest sweetness, flavor pottage with whatever herb or root is available. Every meal is a negotiation, a quiet compromise with limitation. Traveling through villages, you notice the same absence everywhere. Coastal towns may boast barrels of salted fish, inland villages rely on oats and barley, highlands cling to the resilience of goats and their milk. Yet across every region, the staples remain the same: grains, legumes, leeks, cabbage, apples. There are no peppers from across oceans, no potatoes to feed winter bellies, no tomatoes to soften stews. The limitations are universal, the absence palpable, shaping life, labor, and even thought. Hunger, ritual, rhythm, all framed by what the land can actually provide. Even the rare treats, dried fruit, honey, if a neighbor is generous, small amounts of cheese, remind you of what is missing. Each one is treasured because of scarcity, valued not for flavor alone, but for its capacity to extend the imagination beyond daily survival. You imagine spreading honey on a slice of bread as thick as your palm, imagining sweetness not muted by grain or ash, thinking of textures and tastes your body has never known. The mind wanders in these quiet moments, tasting without consuming, savoring without bite. You step outside, cold air filling your lungs, frost crunching beneath your feet. The fields are quiet, almost suspended in winter sleep. You think of maize, the bright kernels unknown here. Imagine boiling them into thick porridge, imagining the sweetness and density, imagining the labor of tending a crop that does not yet exist. You think of tomatoes ripening under a sun warmer than you feel today, red globes heavy with juice, acidity, and sweetness, a flavor entirely alien to your tongue. Each absent food carries a subtle ache, a curiosity and longing that threads through the day. Meals remain slow, deliberate, understated. You break barley bread into pottage, chew each mouthful with care, letting the warmth and slight sweetness settle into your stomach. Boiled beans and leeks accompany it, their flavors muted but reliable. Sometimes a few dried berries, tart and chewy, add small bursts of life to the monotony. You sip weak ale to wash the meal down, each swallow grounding you in the reality of what is, even as imagination drifts toward what isn't. You realize that absence itself shapes rhythm and patience. Daily tasks, milking, baking, tending animals, foraging, are carried out with an awareness of limitation. Every ingredient is precious, every morsel accounted for. Meals are not just nutrition, they are structure, grounding, a slow meditation on endurance. The body adapts to what it knows, even as the mind conjures what it does not. Hunger is tempered by rhythm, by routine, by careful planning. Imagination fills the spaces left by absence, but the hands and stomach remain firmly occupied with the real, the present, the possible. Night settles. You return to the small cottage, the hearth faintly glowing, the scent of smoke and barley filling the air. You eat the evening scraps slowly, tasting the familiar, comforting flavors that have carried you through countless days. You let your mind wander to potatoes and tomatoes, corn and spices, imagining textures, imagining sweetness, imagining warmth. These are distant luxuries, impossible now, but their absence sharpens your appreciation for the simple, humble flavors you do have. You close your eyes, letting the quiet of the night, the ache of hunger, softened by routine, carry you towards sleep. You will rise again to barley bread, pottage, and scraps. The rhythm remains, steady and enduring, even as your imagination carries you across oceans and centuries, tasting flavors that history has yet to deliver. The foods that don't exist here shape the edges of your awareness, coloring dreams and memory. Outside, frost glitters on the thatch. Inside, warmth, rhythm, and slow, deliberate eating cradle you. You drift, imagining meals unknown, flavors never held, textures never tasted. Yet your body rests, nourished by the steady pulse of survival and the quiet satisfaction of sustenance in the medieval world. You sit once more at a quiet table, the soft glow of firelight tracing gentle shadows across rough boards. Outside, winter has taken its hold. The frost stiffens the edges of the thatch, the wind sighs along the eaves, but inside, warmth lingers in the slow curling smoke of the hearth. You break a small loaf of barley bread, its crust thick and uneven, and let your fingers brush over the coarse surface, feeling the memory of hands long gone shaping it, kneading it, pressing it to life. You chew slowly, letting the flavor settle into your stomach, and your mind drifts across centuries, across kitchens both humble and grand. The bread you eat today carries echoes of the past. Each bite is more than sustenance. It is ritual, endurance, a story pressed into dough and baked with fire. You can imagine peasants of centuries ago sitting at similar tables, breaking similar loaves after long days in fields, after the rhythm of pottage and small ale. Their lives, shaped by what the land gave and the seasons dictated, continue to ripple through the foods we hold familiar now. You notice it in the soups simmering gently in your kitchen, the rustic breads on nearby shelves, the stews thick with beans and vegetables. The memory of medieval cooking persists, carried quietly in taste and tradition. You lift a spoon, dipping it into a simple vegetable broth. There is no meat today, only the slow sweetness of leeks, the faint bitterness of cabbage, softened into a gentle warmth. and yet you savor it differently than any modern convenience could provide. Each flavor reminds you of the ingenuity required to survive, to stretch small resources into filling meals. Herbs crushed into the pot lend subtle notes, whispers of flavor that once meant the difference between a meal endured and one celebrated. Garlic, mustard seed, wild herbs, all reminders of the ways medieval cooks coaxed life from the land's modest offerings. You notice how the flavors linger, persistent but quiet, subtle enough that you have to pay attention, to notice. Your thoughts drift to the rhythms that once ruled the peasant table. Morning bread, midday pottage, evening scraps. You realize how these cycles shaped bodies, days, and even communities. Labor intertwined with meals, each bite a marker of time, each dish a companion to work, rest, and ritual. Today the echoes remain, the habit of a hearty breakfast, the slow midday meal, the gentle evening repast. The act of eating is no longer only survival, it is reflection, memory, connection. Yet you feel the pulse beneath, the enduring pattern forged by centuries of necessity. You pick up a small slice of cheese, firm and aged, and let it soften on your tongue. Dairy, once a vital source of nutrition, persists in soups, in sauces, in the cheeses and butters of modern kitchens. You imagine the hands that curdled milk, pressed it into molds, tended it through cool cellars. The process, simple yet precise, ensured survival and comfort in ways invisible but profound. Even now, the richness of milk and the tang of aged curds remind you of those who labored quietly, shaping taste and sustenance from what they had, teaching lessons without words through touch, smell, and flavor. Outside, the wind shifts, brushing snow along the ground. You listen to it, imagining the quiet of villages long ago, the frost stiffening doors and windows, the fire flickering low in cottages where families huddled close. Meals were rarely extravagant, often repetitive, sometimes desperate, but always a form of connection, a pulse threading through daily life. Today, in your own quiet, you can sense that continuity. The simple act of breaking bread, of savoring slow-cooked vegetables, of drinking a small portion of ale or water, these are rituals passed down, shaped by scarcity, necessity, and care. You recall the fruits rare or preserved that brightened a winter meal. Apples dried carefully, berries pressed into jams or stews, small luxuries hoarded and treasured. Even now the habit persists. We slice apples into porridge, stir berries into cakes, fold fruits into pies. The medieval table may not have known sugar as we do, or citrus fruits, but the desire to preserve, to savor, to extend a season's yield, these impulses endure. You feel the subtle connection across centuries, a thread of human ingenuity linking your bite to theirs. Herbs linger in your mind as well, crushed and sprinkled into dishes, dried or fresh. Each little leaf once carried immense weight. A pinch of parsley, a hint of thyme, or a few leaves of sage could transform a modest meal into something memorable. You notice how often these flavors appear in modern rustic cooking, how peasant ingenuity survives not only in sustenance, but in the delight of taste. Even in the humblest meals, the legacy of flavor persists, a quiet conversation between past and present. You take a sip of small ale, thin and warm, barely more than flavored water. The ritual of drinking, of sharing a weak brew with a meal, persists in ways that surprise you. Modern tables rarely serve beer for breakfast or midday sustenance, yet the idea of liquid nourishment, of the gentle warmth flowing through your belly, remains a subtle echo of peasant life. Every swallow reminds you of the resourcefulness of brewing, of careful rationing, of sustaining life and spirit through what the land and season provided. Your eyes wander to a simple stew simmering in a pot nearby. It is modest, root vegetables, beans, a sliver of meat perhaps, but it is steady, comforting, slow-cooked. You taste it carefully, noting textures and flavors. Each bite is a meditation, a connection to centuries of kitchens where meals were rare, precious, and intensely observed. You imagine families passing dishes, sharing scraps, teaching children how to stir, to watch, to taste. The community of the table, the slow rhythms of eating, survives quietly in these actions, even now. Outside, night deepens. You feel the weight of the quiet, the gentle pull of sleep approaching. You imagine the peasants who once dined under the flicker of a fire, bodies tired from work, hands skilled from labor, minds attuned to scarcity and rhythm. They rested with stomachs warmed by pottage, bread, and ale, hearts eased by family and routine, spirits held steady by the constancy of daily meals. The echoes of that life remain, faint but persistent, shaping modern tables, recipes, and our understanding of food as ritual, sustenance, and comfort. You break another piece of barley bread and chew slowly. Even in its coarseness, you sense the weight of history. Each bite carries centuries of hands kneading dough, tending ovens, rationing grains, stretching ingredients to feed families. The simplicity of the food conceals complexity, lessons in survival, patience, and adaptation, encoded in taste and texture. You savor it not only as nourishment but as memory, a slow meditation on human endurance and culinary ingenuity. The hearth flickers low. You lift a spoon of pottage again, tasting the subtle blend of vegetables, herbs, and perhaps a sliver of meat. Even in its modesty, you recognize continuity. Modern soups, rustic dishes, stews thick with grains and legumes all carry whispers of these kitchens, these quiet, patient lives. The flavors, textures, and rhythms endure, shaping not only taste, but the understanding that food is more than calories. It is memory, ritual, and connection. You lean back, letting the warmth settle into your body, letting your thoughts drift gently across time. From barley bread to pottage, from small ale to dried fruits and herbs, the medieval table pulses beneath the modern one you now inhabit. You sense the enduring patterns, the daily rhythm, the careful stewardship of ingredients, the joy found in small abundance, the resilience born of scarcity. Each taste, each ritual, a quiet echo of those who came before, shaping lives, communities, and palates in ways often invisible but profoundly felt. Outside, the wind hums along the eaves, soft and steady. Inside, you finish your last bite, the warmth lingering on your tongue and in your stomach. You feel the quiet satisfaction of a meal completed, the pulse of centuries beneath each chew, the rhythm of past lives flowing subtly through your own. You rise from the table slowly, fingers brushing the wooden boards one last time, letting the memory of hands, hearths, and simple sustenance linger. And as sleep finally draws near, you realize the lesson is simple. Even the humblest food, the simplest meal, carries history. Each bite is a bridge across time, connecting you to kitchens long gone, to rhythms long established, to the enduring legacy of the peasant table. Tomorrow will bring more meals, more work, more rhythm, but tonight you rest, wrapped in warmth, memory, and the quiet, enduring pulse of history carried through bread, soups, and rustic dishes that remain surprisingly alive today.